Hello, everybody. How's it going? This is not how I wanted to do the next YouTube. I was hoping it would be a vastly different outcome, and I'm still very much in shock and a bit depressed about how all this played out. I wanted to start off, I was going to start off with all the things that I got wrong here. And then I'll go to where I'm most frustrated and then talk about the litigation and about what I think will happen. And we'll go from there. But to start off with, the two biggest things that I got wrong were starting with when they inspected Bothell, I thought with certainty they would inspect Lanza. I didn't see any reason why you'd go into one plant if you couldn't go into the other plant. I mean, I was as certain of this as I was certain of anything. And of course, the market was too. That's why the stock was 330 going into the Bristol-Myers conference call early November. That was devastating. I will never know what happened there. The closest I can come up with is that personnel had to cancel for the vaccines, and they then weren't freed up until early December. You can't say it's because of travel restrictions or because of safety, because they ended up going in 6 weeks later when, as we all know, COVID was much worse in Houston than it was in October or September. So that was very bad. The next thing I got wrong was that when the PDUFA happened and they didn't inspect Lanza, I then felt pretty strongly they would approve without inspection. I thought that because, again, I didn't know why they would go into Bothell if they didn't have a plan to get this done by the PDUFA date. Didn't make any sense to me, even though the company was telling us over and over again that the FDA said they had to inspect both facilities. Wrong. PDUFA came and it was deferred. And the final thing I got wrong, and I won't know exactly why I was wrong here until we see what happens when Lysocell is approved, but I was banking on the FDA caring about the 12/31 date. And some experts, very connected consultants said 12/31 does matter. And then some said it did not matter. The only thing we got universal answers to was that the PDUFA date mattered. And I always said that. We thought that even before the PDUFA date, that the PDUFA date was what's important, much more important than the 12/31 date. I couldn't come up with a reason why they went into Lanza on December 3rd if the 12/31 date didn't matter. I still think the 12/31 date does matter. And we won't know the answer to why they missed it until we see when Lysocell is approved. And then we could do a postmortem. But if it gets approved next week, you could probably only argue one of two things: that the FDA wasn't happy with the private investigators hounding them at Bothell and in Houston, and the FDA wanted to send a message that you should leave their civil servants alone and let them do their jobs. And if they approve it, a week later, it's not going to affect any lives. And the other possibility, which is even more nauseating actually to me, would be that because Trump gave a federal holiday on New Year's, Christmas Eve, that removed a business day, and they needed that extra day to get this done, and we'll get approval on Monday or Tuesday. I think that's rather unlikely. Now, if it gets approved at the end of January or the beginning of February, the whole thesis was wrong. They went into an inspect, and they did have a sense of urgency, but they clearly were going to operate on their own time frame. And I don't think that's very likely. Bristol-Myers' statement is nauseating to me because I was right. Bristol-Myers did not take 15 business days to respond to the 483s. They took 8 calendar days. 15 business days would have been 22 calendar days. They took 8. So my whole thesis, which I thought was the only thesis that mattered, was that Bristol-Myers, as they've shown us in the past, had every incentive to try to keep making the milestone. And they turned around the 483, and the FDA had 2 full weeks, and the FDA did not approve. Now, the FDA also had follow-up questions to the 483. And Bristol-Myers says that they responded to those information requests promptly and they're none outstanding. I'd like to say two things about that. The first thing is, back in May when the major amendment happened, the CEO of Bristol-Myers said the same thing, that currently there's no outstanding information requests. Well, obviously since May, they probably had 100 outstanding information requests. So just because they currently have no outstanding information requests doesn't mean that next week or the middle of January, the end of January, the FDA doesn't come back with more questions. There could be problems with the Lonza facility. We just don't know. I still think the odds of a CRL are very low. I think the FDA would have done it already, but that's a possibility. Maybe the FDA decided to CRL based on Lonza, and since they had an approval letter already prepared, they did not have a complete response letter. And of course, there's now a real urgency to give a complete response. So they'll be giving a complete response in the coming weeks. I don't think that's likely. And I'll talk about what the ramifications are of all this with the litigation next. So the good news about this situation is that the large holders are very deep-pocketed, and I think that they will have no problem funding the litigation. So the way this works, if you want to go look at, the only other example we have is Sanofi. And I'm going to copy and paste a press release here for you to look at. And as you can see in the Sanofi litigation, that the large holders funded the litigation, and they paid for all of the lawyer fees. And in return, they got 20 to 30% of all the profits of the litigation. And the litigation took up almost 3 years. Now, that's the only thing that you should read through here, because it's a very different situation. The Sanofi litigation had to do with multiple tiers of payouts. None of the milestones hit. The drug was approved 8 months later, not maybe a day later or 2 days later. And there was, of course, no COVID and no major amendment situation or any of this kind of stuff. It's a very different kind of lawsuit. They were accused of not using diligent efforts to either get the drug approved, and then not using diligent efforts to market the drug, take the sales milestones. What this lawsuit will come down to is, why was there a major amendment? Why was there an RTF? Were they same things? Were they the same thing, which we all think they were, which is basically maybe large parts of the BLA were, omitted? And was it even if they didn't have poor intentions, if it goes contrary to every other filing Bristol-Myers has ever made, you can make an argument that they were delinquent, and as a result of their delinquency, they missed this deadline. So that's half of or I would say that's 1/3 of the lawsuit. The middle third would be is that they, if possible, if they did, I don't think they did, if they deliberately tried to miss the milestone by dragging their feet at any point over the last year. So, if this gets approved on Monday, you could say even not responding to an information request by a day or two late, that was enough to make it, go past the milestone. We don't know when these information requests came in the last 2 or 3 weeks, or since they responded to the 483. They did not tell us. And the third part of the lawsuit, which I personally think is the most likely to win, though I'm not a lawyer, and I should be clear, I don't think this is going to trial. So the whole idea of winning a lawsuit is ridiculous. This will be settled one way or the other. I feel strongly about that. So, but anyway, the third part of the lawsuit will be what the intent of this CVR was, and whether or not, as a result of COVID and as a result of the major amendment and the RTF and everything put together, if the intent, which was that all three of these drugs had development risk, ozanimod had an RTF, and they hadn't even been accepted for their NDA when they signed the Celgene merger agreement, and then Lysocell and Idacel hadn't had their top lines read out yet on their pivotal trials. So the purpose of it was development risk, and whether or not those three drugs can be approved in their first cycle in a timely manner, basically, but really on the first cycle. And when they came up with those deadlines, that was based on what Celgene told them. Okay, we expect the top line of Idacel and Lysocell to read out in November or October or December of 2019, and we think you should be able to get a BLA filed. Obviously, with Lysocell, they thought they'd get it done by the end of the year, and with Idacel, they probably thought they'd get it done by the end of March. And if they get okay, we'll give them 12 months, which is enough time for, even if it's not priority review, you still would have enough time in the cycle to get it approved. And they were probably virtually certain it would be priority review. So that extra 3 months or 4 months would give you a major amendment if you had a major amendment. In their wildest dreams, did they not contemplate major amendments, RTFs, and of course, the FDA not working in normal course. Now, there's no force majeure clause, which is the act of God, and an act of God, is COVID. So it really would be up to a judge or a jury to whether they want to read into the intent of this contract, because that was the intent. The intent was first review, first cycle approvals for all 3 of these drugs. Now, that hasn't happened yet either, by the way. If Lysocell doesn't get approved or ITIS doesn't get approved, unless then it's proven that it was a result of some sort of purposeful delinquency on Bristol Myers' part, then the litigation might be dead completely. So you still have to get Lysocell approved and ITIS approved. Luckily, I have very high odds of both those things happening, but that's the path from here. So what happens on Monday? So there's a lot of disinformation out there. The stock, I'm 99% sure, will keep trading over the coming months. It'll be delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. Even that takes time. That doesn't happen, I don't believe, on Monday. That takes 10 trading days or something like that, or before it gets listed from the New York Stock Exchange. Then it'll trade over the counter, just like any over the counter stock does. I have no idea how long it trades over the counter for. It could be indefinitely, and you have to. This I'm almost virtually certain of. Just like the Sanofi settlement, there's no reason why this isn't identical to that. It's the same trustee, and they'll be the same lawyers and the same process. You have to own the CVR when the settlement happens for you to get paid. This is not a shareholder lawsuit. This is not anything like a shareholder lawsuit. And don't think that you're going to look, but there's a look back to when you lost money. It has to do with who owns the CVRs at the time of when this is settled. So I don't think there'll be a rush to have tax loss selling come next week, because we have the whole year to do tax loss selling. One strategy that you might want to employ is, because it's probably a pretty small position for a lot of you now, is to consider maybe buying to doubling your position, and then 31 days from now selling the original position for tax losses, and then you could sit on the new position indefinitely until there's a settlement. Now, you might not want to be part of the settlement. Someone asked me a great question on a DM the other day. Isn't there other opportunities out there? Is this the best place for your money? You should look at this as an independent investment now. Is this something you want to bet on? Which is that Lysocell and ITIS will get approved, and then you're then making a bet that you get a fair enough return on your on the current market price based on what the settlement is. So, I think we probably open somewhere between 30 cents and 50 cents on Monday. It was at 49 cents or 50 cents when the after hours closed on Friday, and of course there was still a sliver of hope, even if it was tiny, that you get a press release from Bristol Myers that either they would extend the deadline or they would announce approval. Plus, you're going to have people that see that they responded to the 483 so quickly, and that eliminates some of the malfeasance arguments, and they might sell for that reason. So I don't think it'll go below 30 cents because I kind of know where I think I would be a buyer or a seller, I guess, of more from a litigation perspective. And I think you would see a lot of large funds buying a lot below 30 cents, but what do I know? I really don't think it goes below 20 cents because the way you kind of approach it is your settlement here could be anywhere from $1. I don't really see any settlement below $1. So $1 all the way up to $5. And it really just depends on how much Bristol Myers doesn't want to have to go through a discovery process. $5 is very unlikely, I think. You're more likely to do somewhere between $1 and $3. And that's a huge return from 20, 30, 40 cents. But the part that's really gross is that the reason why a lot of funds might be buying this tomorrow and the next week is that if you fund litigation, you then get 20 to 30% of all profits that are people that can't fund litigation. So if you're a small potato, like most of us are, you don't even have the right to fund litigation or pay up your pro rata amount. So let me give you an example. So let's say this cost $20 million to finance, which is a lot of money. That took 3 years for the Sanofi settlement. I don't think this would cost $20 million if, for instance, this is settled by the summer or by the fall. But let's just use 20 million. Again, way too much. There's 750 million shares outstanding, and $20 million is something like 3 cents a CVR. Obviously, if you could put up 3 cents a CVR, and in return, if there was $1 billion settlement, which is about $1.50 a CVR, you could then get a $250 million return. Your $20 million turns into $250 million for an 11x return, 12x return. Geez. And versus if the CVR is trading at 50 cents and you then lose 30% of that $1.50, your 50 cents is going to turn into $1. So any CVR holder will make a 1x return, and anyone that funded the litigation will make a 12x return, plus the money they made on the CVRs. My point is they're incentivized to buy as much CVRs as they can so that they could then participate, in a greater fashion in the pro rata ripoff of the incentive fee for all the CVR holders that can't fund this. I don't know if it'll be like this. It could be much more honest and fair if it happens quickly. If they only put up a few $1 million for litigation and get settled, I would be hopeful that they would not get a 25 to 30% payoff. I'm going to call the trust team next week and ask them about this. And when I find out more information about this, I'll get back to you guys about it. Me personally, I currently have no plans to sell any of my CVR at 40 cents. It's like a 11 or 12% position, I guess, something like that. And I'd be very interested to see. Now look at this. Matt Rosen, AK, given tweet is a stock fraud. Isn't that great? Get rid of you. Lost my train of thought. Nice human being you are, Alex. So I plan on holding it. And I think that it will go up on lysosel approval, and we'll see what happens after that. But lysosel could also be CRL, then it goes to 0. So, and the last thing I wanted to say, and speaking of Alex Dunn, which again, you're a wonderful human being, Alex. I'm sure your mom's very proud, and your mom and dad, for the way you treat people, because I'm sure you've contributed a lot to society. I don't think a lot of people know why I started doing these YouTubes. I didn't seek out to promote BMYRT. I was asked to be on a podcast by Andrew Walker to discuss this idea, and I graciously did it for no reason. I don't get paid for any of this. I will never start a newsletter or have any kind of monetary gains from YouTube or from talking about stocks ever. So there's no end game on this for me. And what happened was, after I did the podcast, I realized within a day or two that more information came out. And I have a locked Twitter account for the exact reason why people like Alex, ruin it for the rest of us. And since I had a locked Twitter account, there was no reason to. I couldn't give my views to the same people that I did the podcast to. And I thought, I wanted to update those views. And I kind of went down a Pandora's box where once I opened up talking to everybody, not just my locked YouTube account, my locked Twitter account, anytime I had a change of thought or I thought I had the obligation to tell people. I also enjoy doing this, but that's why I'm doing this. That's why this happened. It was not a result of trying to pump a multi-billion-dollar CVR that trades $50 million a day worth of float. Only morons think that there's some sort of value of me going on here and trying to get a few people to buy the stock, the CVR, and somehow it's going to make me money. I mean, you obviously don't know how the stock market works. This isn't a penny stock. And I also never sold it. It's definitely not from my YouTube videos that literally didn't even make, the stock didn't even go up on it. So just want to say that. And there's no reason to even address the morons on Twitter. I mean, there's so much, people are so stupid. There's so much misinformation about everything regarding the CVR. The people that thought this wasn't going to work, they got it wrong over and over and over again, every step of the way. First it was going to be CRL'd, then there was going to be CRL'd in the Bothell inspection because the 43 was so bad. And then the biggest one was that Bristol Myers had no incentive to pay this. So they were never going to turn around the 483. It would just, Also the FDA was never going to inspect Bothell, and then the FDA was never going to inspect Lonza because they're too busy with COVID. Wrong and wrong. I mean, you couldn't have been more wrong. And the most important thing I want to say is this was not a coin flip. When I went on the YouTube, it was trading at $2 to pay $9. Okay, so anybody that thought this wasn't going to work out, the odds of the CVR that were implied were a fraction of 50-50. They were something like probably 25% at $2, and they went as low as 10 or 15%, or even 8% when they went to 65 cents or 75 cents. So it's really easy to bet against something that's pricing in a fraction of a percent to work. And I think the process here was very good. Okay, I'm extremely proud of the way Dan did the work Dan did on this. I also worked with another guy named Ted, who I think did an extraordinarily good job approaching this, and provided me with a ton of his personal research. I don't have access to consultants. That should be obvious, right? So whenever I talk about consultants, it's basically 3 funds sharing with me their information and letting me listen on calls. And I won't name any of the funds; it's not appropriate. But that's how I had access to it. So it was people letting me into their due diligence. And process doesn't give us money at the end of the day. So it's hard to to rest on process and think that makes up for the losses. But you all don't know me very well, but I've taken very concentrated positions for 12 years now, 13 years now, and it's very normal for me. So this loss stinks. I'll come back. I'll come back from it. I look at things always. I should have probably said this. I think I might have said it once. Everything on an after-tax basis. So I happen to not have any taxes, unrealized gains, but that doesn't really change anything because it's just it's an NOL I have. So if you have $1,000 in your account and you lose 25% of it, you lost $250. Your next $250 that you make in your account is tax-free. Further, if you have $1,000 in your account and $500 of it is realized or unrealized gains, if you were going to liquidate your account that day, then you'd owe 50 cents on the dollar of taxes. So your actual account value is $750, not $1,000. So if that $1,000 fell to $750, you then have $250 of realized or unrealized gains, and your actual account value is $625. My only point is I look at everything after tax. So 30% position, while it is very, very big, for me, it's more like a 15% position on an after-tax basis. Now, again, I don't have taxes to pay right now because my portfolio a couple of years ago did a complete turnover, and then I started losing a bunch of money. So you have to have money in your account at the end of the day to then make it back up to pay the taxes. You can't have a gigantic position and lose all your money and then stuck with an NOL that you can't pay off. But I just want to be clear that that's how I look at my position sizing. I think that's the end of my prepared remarks. I will start to the top. And the first question, which is actually I wanted to address, I Break Kids' Legs was upset that nobody disclosed that the private investigators were antagonizing FDA, and that we should have told him that because it was a highly material omission. So a few things about that. First of all, I Break Kids' Legs. Nobody owes you anything. I never had a private investigator there. It was other people's, and they can tell you whatever they want. They don't have to tell you even that the FDA is inspecting. They want to tell you that they can. No, all that they're required to do is not provide you with false, illegal information. And they didn't. I actually think Dan did tweet that he wanted the private investigators to be respectful of the FDA. And of course, it wasn't Dan's private investigator that was being disrespectful. I don't even know what the disrespect was, by the way. But the second thing I want to say about that is we have no idea if that's why this wasn't approved on December 31st. I'm merely speculating that if I was the FDA, I'd be pretty pissed if their civil servants were being hounded by millionaire and billionaire hedge fund people. If I could delay it by a day and cost them tens of millions of dollars, I probably would do it. But we won't know. We won't know until we see when it's approved, and then we can just speculate. With the big institutional sales holders like Vanguard and BlackRock, who got tons of CVRs at closing in November 2019, still hold them, or they have dumped them right away. Yeah, that's a great question. The BlackRock and Vanguard people do not own this anymore. That's very stale, and I think you'd see it if they owned it. I think they'd be filing. So BlackRock and Vanguard and all the ETFs own this when the deal closed, because obviously Celgene is a huge index component of all indexes, and when it closed, the CVR is not part of any index. So you can't look at the crossover ownership between Bristol Myers and the old CVR holders and say that there's an incentive that's aligned. It isn't. Laurent, I already said thank you for that. It was really kind, and there's so many of you that have been so kind. That's the part that really sucks about the vocal minority, right? Is that the vast majority of you have been nothing but gracious to me, and it's the reason why I keep doing them. I don't want to be doing this right now. I have to tell my, how embarrassing it is to tell my wife that I need to do a YouTube and I'll be back in half an hour. Luckily, I think she's like a little bit proud that I'm doing them, but a part of her is probably like, you need to take care of the kids. So I don't want to be doing this, and I appreciate the kind words. Sheep didn't tweet about harassment until after December 31st passed, as far as I remember. But even so, do you really think this caused it? No, I don't. I'm just grasping for straws and trying to figure it out. It's the most likely reason. The most likely reason is that the FDA did seem a sense of urgency to get this approved. That's why they went into Lanza. There were problems with the 483, and that's why there were more information requests after. And they weren't in a sense of complete urgency to make sure it gets done last week versus next week. And we'll have to see what day it gets approved. And that's how we'll know better, whether or not it was a result of, exactly. I don't know. I agree they owe nothing, but it's not occurring to me that the people sharing info would do so selectively. It's my mistake to believe that I cannot verify myself. I think that you're just looking to be angry at somebody, man. I don't even know. You would have sold the CVR if I told you that there was a private investigator. I don't even know what they did. But if I told you a private investigator, said, I'm making this up, by the way. I don't even know what they did. But if the FDA was coming in and they said, hey, when are you guys gonna be done with your inspection? Or, that would have made you sell the whole CVR. I think that you're trying to find someone to blame for, the losses. And it isn't the lack of Dan, who's the only person that even told you that they inspected, not giving you, he doesn't work for you. You don't work for him. He doesn't work for you. He owes you nothing. I remember Sheep saying, there you go. I remember Sheep saying there was harassment during the inspection. He asked whoever was doing it to stop. I also specifically remember that. And I guess, I break kids' legs, wish that he got it personally phone called to him from Dan. How much of a factor is it that BMY does not want to be perceived as a big evil drug company that is willing to profit from COVID to avoid paying the CVR? This one's really tough. So I don't think that Bristol Myers is that terrified of being having something uncovered that shows malfeasance, because I don't think that they did anything wrong. I think that this is a huge amount of money. We're talking about $6.5 billion, and they certainly don't want to pay and will not pay anywhere close to that to get this behind them. Would they pay 100 million or 200 million or 300 million? They probably would, but I don't think that the large holders would settle for that. So I don't think this will be that quick. You're going to have to get IDA approved first, and then you're going to have to see what the bid and ask is between Bristol Myers and the largest holders. And it's just a guessing game. What I can't get inside with Bristol Myers' head. People are absolutely right that they can just pay their employees bigger bonuses. There's lots of ways for them to take care of their employees and not take care of the CVR holders. So I also don't think that in their mind, doing what's right is paying it out. I mean, obviously, they know what the intent of the CVR was, but I don't think they really care about us. Anybody that owned the CVR was speculating on getting a lottery payout on 3 drugs being approved. We were hardly doing God's work. I mean, that wasn't why we owned it. So in their mind, that was my other thought from the FDA, is that the FDA not only can, suck it to the CVR holders, they might think the $7 billion is better off in Bristol Myers' pocket. If Bristol Myers has $7 billion, they're more likely to maybe develop new drugs and do better things for the world with it than pay it out to us. I just have no idea what's going on inside the FDA. And maybe some of the people at the FDA are hoping to get jobs at Bristol Myers one day, and they think that Bristol Myers will never forget who the senior people were at the FDA. It's pure speculation. I have no idea. Or it could have just been pure bureaucracy. The most likely outcome is that it's pure bureaucracy. They didn't feel an urge to get it done by the end of the year, and they're going to do it, in the first half of January. Hey, Matt, I just want to say thanks again for all the analysis you've given us the past few months. Even though it didn't work out, I've learned so much for you and Sheep, and I'm so grateful. That's really nice of you to say. Thank you, Shimmy. Marty, I agree that BMY wanted to hit the milestone. For the same reason, won't they want to do something proactive and reasonably significant to preserve integrity, reputation, avoid protracted litigation? They don't want to pay out too much money. They'll get sued by their own shareholders. So I don't know the answer. I don't think they'll be in any rush to do it. They have more money than the CVR holders do, and they could pay the millions of dollars, which is pocket change, to how much the CVR costs to defend themselves in the meantime. So you have to ask yourself. I got carried away. Sorry. You have to ask yourself, if it's trading at 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 cents, what do you think the odds are? One, that they settle. I think it's high, but that's only if they approve Lysocell and Idacel. So what are the odds Lysocell and Idacel get approved? And then what are the odds they settle? And then what do they settle for? And then how long does it take? If it takes 2 to 3 years, you have to discount that back, obviously. If it takes 9 months, you discount it back less. So I think you have a really good proposition at 25 or 35 cents, and you have less of a good proposition at 50 cents. The difference between litigation value today versus what I thought it was maybe a few weeks ago is I didn't see a reason why this wouldn't be approved by the end of the year if they turned around the 483s quickly. So I thought you had a natural hedge. If you found out that they didn't get it approved, then by definition, I thought that the 483s would have been held and they wouldn't have responded to them until this week coming up. And then I think that would have made for a great lawsuit. But didn't happen. They've returned the 483s quickly, and we still didn't get approval. Matt, as you said, since the intent of the CVR will be satisfied with the January approval of Lysocell and a March approval of Idacel, won't BMY want to do something significant to perceive as honorable? I mean, I don't know who the other side is that they want to be honorable about. So it's complete bullshit that they need to make up the CVR so that they can do M&A in the future. It's just not true. Most M&A doesn't have CVRs. Some of the smaller deals that are private have payouts and milestones and stuff. But all this means is that they'll put more clauses into those contracts to make sure that they don't get screwed by, a force majeure or something like that. I mean, the things that happened here for the most part are COVID. Without COVID, this gets approved on time. The major amendment does not matter, period. Without COVID, the RTF probably doesn't matter. We won't know until we see if it gets approved in time, if there's a major amendment there again. But it's COVID that screwed us here. The major amendment and the RTF were just kind of a little icing on the cake. Jeff Breeze, I just want to dive a little deeper into Marty's question, because if I was curious about litigation settlement value if the intent of the CVR is met. Certainly would be much higher, but how much? This isn't my area of expertise, and this only happened one other time with Sanofi. So I don't even think that the trustee and the lawyer could tell you how much they could get. They really won't know until they go into discovery and they see what you have to learn. You have to learn about why the major amendment happened, why the RTF happened. Was Bristol Myers malfeasant or negligent by having both happen? Bristol Myers only owned Celgene for about 5 weeks or 6 weeks or less when they submitted the NDA for Lysocell. That makes it hard for me to believe that they could be held negligent for that NDA, given that the people that all worked there own CVRs and came from Celgene. But they also submitted an NDA for Idacel 4 months later that got an RTF. And at that point, if you've owned the company for 4 months, you think you'd probably be more in charge of what's going on there. Also, someone told me legally, I think it was Dan, legally, the day they bought Celgene, they acquired all the liabilities. So it's on their responsibility to make sure that the BLAs were whole and complete. So we have to see. My thesis here was never to make money off of litigation. I have no idea what's going to happen in litigation, and you're going to have to make your own view whether or not that's the best way you want to go forward with your investing. There's a lot of other stocks out there. There's a lot of other things you could do with it. Matt, do you think it is worth organizing some legal talent for the benefit of this community to help with our go-forward strategy? I'm going to call someone else asked that on Twitter, I think, or earlier, which is a really good question. Is there anything we need to do, or do we just sit here and wait? So it's a good question, Glenn. I am going to press to the trustee next week that I think that if a group of people that own 5 or 10 million shares of the CVR combined want to pay their pro rata for the litigation, they should have the right to do so. And if they don't give us the right to do so, I might make us think about it. So they shouldn't be profiting off of small shareholders that can't, even if they want to, fund these pennies on the dollar. I mean, it literally would be pennies. So if it costs $20 million to fund this, we'd each have to put up 3 cents for our pro rata, funding of each CVR. And I'm sure most people, if not every person, would gladly do that, especially because you would then profit off of that 3 cents. I should say that's not entirely true now that I say that out loud. If only half of the CVRs funded the litigation, you'd be putting up 6 cents. And for that 6 cents, you would make 20x on the 6 cents. Something like that. That's true, I believe. 250 million would turn into 33 cents. And your 6 cents would turn into 33 cents. So you make 6x in that scenario. I think I'm doing this right, but I could be doing it wrong. I think I'm doing this right. Oh, no, there's not 17 million shares outstanding. There would only be 375 million shares outstanding in that situation because you make more. You make a lot more than that. Doesn't matter. The funding litigation is very profitable. That's all you have to know. So, Glenn, when I call the trustee next week, I'll ask that question if we could form a group and if they're willing to let us fund it from a pro rata perspective, maybe an LLC or something. I don't know. The litigation cost analysis and how it hurts the small guys, which includes legacy Celgene employees, seems to indicate that maybe BMY will want to do a tender practice so quickly. Yeah, maybe. It's a good question. Baptist, will the bank let us continue trading the CVR even though it's removed from the stock exchange? Yes, Baptist. It'll trade over the counter. I'm 99% sure of this. It'll keep trading. That's why they wrote in the press release, the CVR will be delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. It did not say the CVR will be canceled. If a security is canceled, then it ceases to trade completely at any exchange. You gave great advice on Groupon and Tiffany too. Thanks. Yeah, that seems to be forgotten about, right? Groupon doubling, Tiffany being my R block of the year, working within weeks. Anyway, it is what it is. Jordan late, how do we trade our CVRs? I'd like to buy some more. You should have to rewatch the video when it's done. 2021, the year of the Dell. I still like Dell a lot, though I wish VMware could start showing some bottom line growth. I'm not sure if VMware is going to re-rate until they do start showing bottom line growth. But one day I'll do a Dell podcast, whatever this thing's called, and we could talk about Dell. I break kids' legs. This is why fund managers don't like talking about current positions. They could change their mind tomorrow and feel obligated to notify publicly. Yeah, no, we don't owe anybody anything. I break kids' legs. Yeah, you're exactly right. You have to be a big boy. And if you want to read, a write-up. So let me give you an example. There's letters that come out all the time from fund managers where they have quarterly letters all the time. And they don't put out a press release telling you they sold the stock after they put out those quarterly letters. They don't owe you anything. They don't owe you anything. So you should be happy that you got the thesis and the information from them in the first place. And if you want to invest in their fund, you should invest in their fund. Other than that, you have to do your own work. If ISL is approved for March 31st, but Lysol is CRL, is litigation 0? Yes, litigation is probably a 0 unless you can prove that they sabotage something in the Lysol process. So maybe they, purposely did something wrong at the plant. We have to know this. You have to know what the CRL is for. If the CRL is for some sort of negligence at the plant, and you can make an argument that they should have done a better job, which I'm sure the large shareholders will still try to do, it makes it much harder. It makes it harder because the intent of the CVR was for these 3 drugs to be approved. If one's not approved, of course, then you didn't even make the intent of the CVR. You don't just get money. You can't just sue us to get money. To amplify, legal talents can give us a better read to the intent argument. I'd be willing to fund a, sorry. Wow, I went down too far. Hold on. I went down too far. Wow, there's a lot of questions here. Legal talent could fund, what did I say here? Legal talents can fund the intent argument. I'd be willing to fund a share of some legal research like that, since the intent route likely has common law precedents. I mean, I don't know why we have to pay for that, Glenn. I'm sure the big holders and the trustee are going to do all of this. So it just seems, unless we want to have edge from what they say, and then we could buy the security based on that edge, I don't know if that's necessary, really. Would BMY proactively offer conversion at more advantageous terms to itself present a class action, considering many of its employees and executives might be holders of CVR? If Bristol Myers was going to do a proactive conversion or a tender for a lower price, I strongly believe they would have already done it. I think it's very likely you would see that in the next month. Like, very unlikely, but it's possible. I don't think they would say they're delisting from the New York Stock Exchange the CVR, and then 2 weeks from now say they're going to offer us $3 conversion. If you purchase CVR now, are you entitled to the same damages? Yes, I believe you are. I'm 99% sure you are, Eric. That's exactly what happened to Sanofi litigation. Please watch the CVR. Please watch the YouTube video from the beginning. If this scenario pays out 5 out of 10 times serious positive EV, yep, Jake, that's right. Glenn asking, for those asking about converting the CVR, I doubt that happens. They would likely result in incremental BMY liability resulting in any post-channel and sellers. I agree. I don't think they're going to do anything anymore. The CVR will be studied in business school for decades. Geo needs to think about what kind of legacy we'll leave, since if you insist on a $0 payout, reputation, respect, honor, these things matter. I mean, the CVR will definitely be studied, but the real people that are at fault here are the Celgene board and the Celgene lawyers. They didn't anticipate the unanticipated, and it's always hard to anticipate the anticipated, but they didn't. And what it should have said was these 3 drugs being approved, Ozanimod being approved on the 2nd cycle, and these 2 drugs being approved on the 1st cycle. And that's what it should have said. And the problem with that is maybe they needed a new trial. Maybe it could have said that. It could have said Lysocell being approved on the Transcend trial and Idacel being approved on the Karma trial. And if they needed new trials, then they wouldn't be approved on it. And that would have removed all the time frame. If it's approved in those trials, then you get paid. And they didn't do that. So it was a mistake. I guess it's my fault for not. Okay, yeah, I'm not doing that. LOL, kudos to your wife for letting you take time to take away from the family to talk stocks with us. Listen, Matt, I had to tell my wife I had to watch YouTube, so I am worse off. I don't know. I think hosting YouTube seems, putting yourself on a camera talking to people seems worse than listening to stock advice, I guess. But yeah, Celgene employees were given CVRs tied to RSUs. Several employees bought more shares in their PA. We'll be interested to see how the BMR will do that. I have to plug in my laptop. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry about that. The Celgene employee thing, we can't get hung up on. They can easily pay out, small bonuses to all Juno employees and do it under the guise of congratulations on your first approval, Juno. We're going to give everybody, $25,000. They could even do it. They could do it based on seniority. So there's lots of ways for them to make up for the money that the Juno employees aren't going to have, that the Celgene employees. Do you think litigation will be set up before end of year? 50% chance. I could see a strong argument for Bristol Myers wanting this out of the way, but it's a lot of money. We're dealing with a lot of money here. So, that brings me to another thing that I want to discuss where I don't know if I got it wrong, but the thing I didn't like about the CVR from the very, very beginning was that Bristol Myers was never aligned with us. And the reason why that is twofold. One, all three of these drugs, ozanimod, lysocel, and ide-cel, have pretty low net present values. So net present value, what that means is if you take all the future cash flows of these drugs and you discount them back, what's it worth today? So put very simply, if Bristol Myers wanted to sell the rights to lysocel the day after it gets approved, they sell it to another drug company, how much money would they pay for those rights? And then Bristol Myers has nothing to do with it ever again. It's my belief that ozanimod, lysocel, and ide-cel each are worth less than $1 billion each. So together, that's $3 billion. And this CVR costs $6.5 billion. And further, as one of my friends like to always tell me, they don't have to not bring these drugs to market. All they had to do is get them approved after the deadline, and they would still get the drug and just not pay the $6.5 billion. So the second thing I didn't like about the CVR, which is very similar to the first thing, is I like CVRs that are kind of rounding errors to the company. So to give you an example, I own a CVR in ACHN got acquired by Alexion, and they have this little CVR outstanding, and it pays like $100 million or $50 million or something. And Alexion is a $40 billion company. So they're definitely not going to try to sabotage that drug for $50 million or $100 million savings. And that CVR also, has a 5-year expiration date and all this other stuff. And most importantly, that drug, if it gets approved, is worth, 50 times what the CVR payout is. I never liked that aspect of the CVR. Now, the reason why I'm hesitant to use that as I was wrong is I don't think Bristol Myers has sabotaged this. So all signs have pointed to that they haven't. So I didn't get this wrong because Bristol Myers sabotaged it. I got it wrong because COVID happened, and there were all sorts of true black swan events that I never could have foreseen. I mean, an RTF, I would have given you 100 to 1 that there wasn't going to be an RTF, and then there was an RTF. I mean, Bristol Myers has never had an RTF in its corporate history, I believe, and COVID is truly, 100 to 1 situation. I mean, the FDA has never shut down before. The FDA worked during government shutdowns on PDUFAs. So even if there was government shutdown, then they would have went to inspect these plants. So it's just a lot of really bad luck over and over and over again. So many blowups, so many things happening over and over and over again. And then the final blow up, was the December 31st deadline. If not settled quickly and significantly, then everything BMY does in the coming months, like paying bonuses to employees who held CVRs, will be under intense scrutiny. Doesn't BMY want to avoid? Maybe. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and this has never happened before, except for Sanofi. So all I'm doing is bullshitting, speculating. I believe that they're going to want to settle this. The large holders obviously believe that too. Plenty of people think that there's not much of a litigation value here, and they'll sell. And the people that think there's litigation value will buy. And, that makes a market. I'm hearing that many current BMY shareholders who also hold the CVR are very upset and may dump the stock. Isn't there value possibly on $6 billion to keep market cap from cratering? Well, the market cap's not going to go down on Monday. Bristol Myers stock won't go down. It probably won't even go up. I don't think they care at all. After getting 483 from Bothell, why didn't they have satisfactory answers for the Lonza 483 that would prompt new information requests? They're very different 483s probably. I mean, the Lonza plant isn't a clone of the Bothell plant. You have to understand, there were multiple CAR-T approvals before this, and Bristol Myers was able to study and read all the other CAR-T 483s to prepare for the Bothell 483. So it's not that they weren't prepared. The question will be is what were the 483s at Lonza? Is it possible that they were similar? And yeah, if they were similar, then that was some pretty poor preparations. And that would be grounds for the lawsuit. I don't believe that's the case at all. I'm sure that they looked at after they got the Bothell 483s, they probably fixed some things at Lonza. And I'm sure they were rather very different issues that were addressed in each of those 483s. Some pushback on BMY only owning Celgene for a few weeks before BLA was filed can argue BMY rushed Celgene to file BLA, yeah, sure, you can. They had time to file more accurately to avoid PDUFA being extended for 6-month priority drug. Yeah, this will all be argued for sure. As a former sell shareholder, I saw market cap way beyond 6 billion lost when street credibility reputation was lost. Doesn't mean I want to avoid things by doing this, something proactive and significant. I just don't know if this is the kind of thing that ruins credibility. It ruins, if I'm a BMY shareholder, in some ways I think it's crafty that they got out of paying this money. You know, the RTF and the major amendment are very sloppy, but they saved $6.5 billion, and if they could then now give it out to me or buy back stock with it, you know, I'm not sure this is a sign that they have been sloppy as a corporate company, as a corporate entity, or that they've, you know, missed their corporate goals. You know, again, this is irrelevant to Lysocell and Idacel are irrelevant to Bristol Myers. So of these 3 drugs, ozanimod, I think the launch has not gone very well, but I couldn't tell you for sure. That's just a guess. Idacel is basically going to be irrelevant if the Johnson & Johnson drug gets approved, which just started a rolling NDA. Who knows if it gets approved or not, but if it does get approved, I would think most of the patients go on that, though that has some toxicity issues. And Lysocell is a good drug. It's probably the best drug of the 3, and it will be used. And there doesn't appear to be currently any CAR Ts that are near approval that will, you know, surpass it. So that is a good drug that will save lives, that will be used for the next few years. We'll have to see whether it can be used on earlier lines of therapy and how much money they make off of it. This is not a question, but a sincere thank you for all your efforts and tremendous selfless sharing of fantastic due diligence analysis. Thanks, Marty. I appreciate it. Christopher, was months late finding your videos, found your information on BMYRT very useful. Currently trying to follow your group on Andel thesis. Any way from someone new to Twitter getting access to your feed? I only let people into my feed if you have a history on Twitter, so you can't be a new account, and you have to be a regular tweeter so I can see you've been tweeting for, you know, a few years. And hopefully you also follow, or someone follows you that I know or follows me. Those seem like a lot to ask for, but they really aren't. If you meet any of them and you got kind of if you don't seem like a shadow account or a new account, if you at me, and make sure you follow me. Somebody asked me to let them follow them last week, and I couldn't find them. So it's very hard for me to find people. I have to search. Twitter does not make it easy for me to find pending followers. I've had a locked account for so many years that I have thousands of, this isn't bragging, I have thousands of locked pending followers, and there's no way to even know the number I have. They don't even tell me. So I have to like scroll through pages after pages after pages and then do a control find for a follower. So it's hard for me to find it. Sometimes it takes me half an hour. But I'm open to letting people follow me that contribute and are, you know, decent people. If you're a Trump supporter and you tweet anything about Trump or MAGA, I'll block you. Even if you don't tweet it at me. So I have no tolerance for any of that. So yeah, it's not a safe space for MAGA. Is it typical or unusual for FDA to ask for additional info after receiving response to 483? Did BMY Lonza mess up, albeit in China, reply quickly to the 483? I don't know the answer to that, Marty, but that'll be all under discovery. It's a good question. But it's hard to say that they were, you know, delinquent when we wanted them to get the 483 responded as fast as possible to give us a chance. So it's hard. It's hard to imagine that they're at fault for that. Considering a new trustee has experience in past CVR lawsuit, hopefully they learn from that deal and we see a larger payout. So what are their incentives? The trustee and the lawyers, their incentives are for this to take as long as possible. They don't get paid any success fee, I don't believe, but I will definitely look into that and see. The good news is that they're going to be led by the major holders. So if the major holders say they want to settle at $2 or $1.50, the lawyers and the trustee will take cues from those major holders. You don't have to worry about them holding the CVR hostage and keeping it going for years just to make money. But yes, it's great that they have the experience on this. They probably learned a lot from the Sanofi, and I think that is a real positive. And Griffin, you're the best man. Keep doing this. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I break kids' legs. By the way, the username I break kids' legs leads me to be a little bit more, you know, edgy with you. I'm sorry, but it does. I didn't intend to come across as antagonistic. Thanks for your efforts. I enjoy your videos. Happy New Year, by the way. Take care. No big deal. Can we get a big round of applause for Matt's tireless work? I am so impressed by his dogness and conviction. Thanks a lot, Allison. That's really kind of you. Changing my cat strategy. Oh yeah, where are the cats? I guess I guess the algo for YouTube realized not to recommend this video to cat lovers, so that was good. Changing my cat strategy with the cheapest cat. My guess is the trustee fights for $2 for Zotamon and $3 for Ida sales approved, and BMY settles for $1.50 for each. Maybe it wasn't all or none, but you could probably approach, Matt, the settlement anyway. There's so many ways to approach it, right? The Ozanimod milestone was hit. The Ida sale milestone was hit. Why do you think you should pay us nothing if 2 were hit and 1 was missed by a day? I would hope a jury would see that that is not the intent of the CVR. 2 were hit, 1 was missed by a week or a day or a month. Why did the CVR exist? Why did the lawyers draft it? And was it outside of the scope of the agreement for why they didn't have to pay it? And if I wasn't a jury, I would be very open to that thesis. Will the major holders likely unify our own strategy and action, or will there be several separate actions? I think it would be one group. They're going to all pull their money, and it'll all be. In fact, there's already an attorney that's been appointed, as far as I understand. So I was on a call last week with holders. I was just listening, and the trustee has already engaged an attorney counsel. That's the same counsel that worked on the Sanofi litigation. So this is already happening. This isn't a theoretical litigation proposition. They're definitely going to go forward with litigation. Whether or not they get paid on it is a whole other issue. But this isn't going away for Bristol Myers. There will be a litigation angle. Is it a jury trial? I don't know the answer to that. It'll never go to that. It'll never go to a jury trial. Hail Trump, hail our people. Oh God. I really hope you're kidding, Allison. Jeff Breeze, thank you for these videos. Hope they continue through litigation and IDSL process. Yeah, I'm not going to go away. I'll keep doing stuff, especially after we find out why lysocell is approved, when lysocell is approved. When I learn more about the litigation process and anything I hear from the calls, I will definitely keep you guys informed and what's going on there. The thing still trades. So this is a pretty important point. So the trustee and the lawyer will not share any material information with any of us because it keeps trading. So let's say they're in negotiation for a settlement with Bristol Myers. We'll never know. We'll never know till it happens, because then you can unduly trade on it. And they don't want any of us to be restricted. So you could wake up one day to a settlement or wake up one day to an exchange offer, and I would never know. And the large holders, the only way they would know is if they signed an agreement to put themselves, behind a wall. What is your top pick for 2021? Max. I'm guessing my name is Matt, and I don't really have a top pick for next year, honestly. My biggest holdings are Groupon and Dell. I think Dell will offer a great return, but not a huge return. So it'll be far from a home run, but it could easily. I think it could be up 50% in the next 12 months. And one day I'll talk about that one. But I don't have any home run, great stock picks right now for 2021. I still like Groupon, and you can see my old video on Groupon, which is on this channel. It's about 6 or 7 or 8 videos ago. People hate pharma companies. A jury would want them to pay out of their nose. Yeah, that's true. A jury would probably much more likely to side with us than they would side with Bristol Myers. That's another angle. So it's a pretty bad look if Bristol Myers took any steps at all to impede this drug to go to market, because that means that they delayed this drug going to cancer patients. Again, I do not think they did that, but if the major amendment or the RTF show malfeasance, or just show poor form, or what's the word I'm looking for? If they just show that they were delinquent, then they might not want that to get uncovered in a trial or in discovery, and I think they will settle. If it was a jury trial, attorneys would almost certainly dismiss biased jurors. BMY headlines at JPM Biotech on January 11th. What do you expect them to say, or what will analysts ask in the CVR situation? They might ask them, do you plan on settling, or do you plan on making an exchange offer? And I'm sure they'll say no. there's no force majeure clause and the CVR has expired. One could argue negligence by Selge and its advisors. BNY inherited this contingent liability, another far-fetched angle that lawyers will pursue. I agree, Glenn. But if they argue negligence by Selge and its advisors, does that mean we would get paid? I mean, that's not Bristol-Myers' fault. I don't know. I don't know why that would then. I guess you're saying BMY inherited that liability. Interesting. Maybe. Whether they did it or not, technically, just need the lawyers to frame it like they did convincingly yet. I want to exit my entire stake on Monday. Realistically, how can I do that you think? Is it no decision? Anthony, you should be able to trade it just like you traded. First of all, I think it doesn't, Glenn, maybe you know the answer to this, but I don't think it'll be delisted from New York Stock Exchange for at least 10 days. So it should trade just like a normal stock on Monday. But guess what? Even if it gets delisted, you should be able to put in an order, Anthony, just like you would a normal stock. It'll have a bid, it'll have an ask, you'll put it in a limit order, and you'll be able to sell it. You should have no problem selling it, just like you would a normal stock, Anthony. Anybody else? This was long. Wow. I just thought it was really important to do this because there's, like I said, there's a lot of disinformation about what happens going forward. And I didn't want people to think that, if you buy it on Monday or Tuesday, you don't have the right to any value in a lawsuit. I think that's 99% sure not true. I also don't want people to think if they sell it, they'll be able to get value from the previous CVR they owned because of a shareholder lawsuit. I'm 99% sure that's not true. I don't want people to think it's not going to trade. I'm 99% sure that's not true. And I just thought people should have full understanding of what's happening going forward. Glenn says everything he thinks I said is accurate, that it probably trades in New York Stock Exchange for the next 10 days or whatever and then gets delisted. I doubt BMY wanted to be in this situation. I believe they wanted Lysol approved last week. However, they will continue to say this was in the hands of the FDA and the end BMY got very lucky. Yeah, Matt, I think you're right. I do not think Bristol-Myers wanted this to happen. And I think that Bristol-Myers and the FDA are now in a pickle that they didn't want to be in. They don't want litigation. They don't want discovery. Look, Bristol-Myers still might get a CRL. That's one plausible explanation here. We're just gonna have to see what happens before we Monday morning quarterback it. Any other questions? I have a text message. Nope, nothing from there. In the final week, since the timeline was so tight, do you think the harassment issue is a larger concern than you alluded to? There's enough ambiguity for individuals that they have to delay. After all, they ask for additional info. We can't answer that question until we see if it gets approved Monday or Tuesday. If it gets approved Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to feel very bad about a lot of things. That'll be one of them. If it gets approved 2 or 3 or 4 weeks from now, I'll feel less bad about that. Let's see what happens. The whole idea of additional info. So, you get a 483. Bristol-Myers responds to it, and it could be very long. It could be 50 pages or 30 pages. The FDA doesn't just have to say, okay, these are good answers. We're approving. I think it's reasonable to assume that after 483s are responded to, sometimes the FDA comes back and says, we don't really like what you're doing with this situation. Can you please, expand on how you're going to remedy this? Because remember, some 483s are so bad, they result in CRLs. So the FDA might have gotten the 483 back. They had an internal meeting. They said, we don't think this was good enough to keep this from being CRL'd, but let's give them one more shot at some clarification. There is so much that could happen, so many paths about why the additional information was requested. It's just hard to speculate. Where is this thing trading tomorrow? It's no longer listed in the NYSE. Well, first of all, I think it's going to be on the NYSE for the next 10 days, but it's called over the counter. So it'll kind of look like a NASDAQ stock. It'll just trade. There'll be market makers that make a market on over the counter stocks. It won't be listed on the NASDAQ, but it'll trade just like it's on the NASDAQ. And you'll have to put in bids, and asks, offers to trade it. That's it. You don't have to know the exchange. Just go to your broker and put in a limit order. You'll see quotes for it. I still think of approved Monday. It was simply unfinished work, and the superiors said, oh, well, enjoy the holiday. We can finish next week. Nothing to do with harassment. I do think it's more likely that I'm just making up stuff about why this didn't get approved, and it's not harassment. I agree. It's just very unfortunate to me because I thought the 1231 mattered. And if it gets approved Monday or Tuesday, it's going to be so freaking painful. but it's not good for Bristol Myers. If this gets approved, we do want this approved Monday or Tuesday, by the way. It's much better for litigation. The sooner it's approved to 12/31, it makes the case much better. So you're hoping for a Monday approval or a Tuesday approval. Damn, so I can't list this as loss in my 2020 taxes. You can't, Anthony. So if you're rushing to sell it for tax losses, there's no reason to rush to sell for tax losses. If you're rushing to sell it because you don't want to be part of litigation, you rather just save your 30 or 40 or 50 cents, you should definitely sell it. But you can't list this on your taxes, unfortunately. On the $1 to $5 settlement projection, do you have a methodology for how you made that estimate? Of course not. I have absolutely no idea. It would be that Bristol Myers sees liability. The more liability they see and the stronger the case it is for the plaintiffs, the more likely they're going to hold out for $9 and the more likely they're going to try to take this to trial. If the plaintiffs do not see a strong case, then they're going to be more likely to settle for $1 and just move on. That's it. It'll be based on the discovery and based on what the lawyers, the plaintiffs tell them and what the lawyers tell Bristol Myers. Bristol Myers probably thinks they have a pretty good case. There's no force majeure clause. They think they probably acted with diligent efforts the entire time. And, that's what the contract says. So, there was also another thesis that this contract is governed by New York law, I believe. And somebody had a thesis that since New York shut down because of COVID, that a judge might interpret that New York law made it to where there was no way. Oh my God, now I have to mute you, Allison. It's really, really sad. See, Allison, you're MAGA. That just crushes me. Crushes me. And lost my train of thought. Allison's MAGA. I mean, 40% of the country is MAGA. So 4 out of 10 of you are MAGA, which is really something. But anyway, I think they'll decide based on what the evidence is. Mark Buffett, if it is proven FDA delayed a life-saving drug for a week to screw with investors, where is the liability for the FDA? I don't think that the FDA is going to like having to go through discovery, and they will. They'll have their emails and their stuff subpoenaed too. It's more likely FDA just acted in normal course and did not do anything on purpose or anything malfeasant. I can't reiterate this enough. I'm not suggesting either FDA or Bristol Myers has committed any malfeasance. I don't think either of them did. I think it's much more likely that they both approached this honestly, and I was wrong about the 12/31 deadline, and they're bureaucrats, and they waited till next week to approve. Glenn lost my train of thought about New York. I think, Glenn, the idea was that if New York shut down the state and the city due to COVID, then that somehow would mean that the CVR, that the normal course of action should also get a pause and get a delay. There should be a delay allowed for contracts in New York because you couldn't do business as a result of the city and the state shutting down due to COVID. Something along those lines, governed under New York law. If the courts or the governor said, stop doing what you're doing for X number of weeks or months, then that would be kind of like a pause, and you couldn't do things like inspections. You couldn't do whatever. Just throw it out there. It would be an angle. If it is proven, the language BMS, Maisie, oh my God, we almost made it through the whole thing before Maisie started barking. The language BMS put in their press release indicated to me that they were gearing up to challenge any suit very aggressively. I think, Anthony, yes, they are, and I'm not expecting any settlement anytime soon. But what else do you expect Bristol Myers to say? They want to get this settled for the least amount of money possible, and they're definitely going to defend themselves as much as they can. So you should not expect any settlement anytime soon. The earliest it would come, I believe, would be in the summer, maybe the fall, and you shouldn't expect any kind of exchange offer or anything like that. That ship has sailed. If it was going to happen, it would have happened last month or maybe on Saturday mornings or Friday mornings press release. And it didn't happen. There's an opening at Bath of a quality director. Don't worry about that at all, Jeff. I was kidding when I made a joke about the job postings. There's been job postings at Bothell and in New Jersey for months. Don't read anything into that. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a sign that they had a problem with the facility. There was quality control jobs posted for months before the 483, and there'll be quality control jobs posted for months after the 483. The FDA has a tons of FO. I want to address two things. Thanks a lot. I know how long this is, guys. The first thing is the fake tweet on Wednesday was atrocious. I have absolutely no idea, where that came from. I'm the first person to discover those Twitter accounts a few weeks earlier. And the way I discovered them was every day or two, I would search for Twitter for the original Abekma and Brianza Twitter accounts to see if they changed. I would go into the search bar and I would put in the word, and it would drop down and tell me if anything's changed. And a few weeks ago when I put it in, the Brianza ones showed me the 3 new ones. And then somebody on Twitter or here said, "Oh my God, dude, you're such an asshole. I cannot believe you're back." I cannot believe you're calling me a known stock manipulator. I might actually sue you for libel. I hope that's your real name. Zach Dunn. Nice. Worked off consequences, Mr. Dunn. So when I found it, somebody on Twitter saw the feeds, and they were able to look at the back door of Twitter, the API or something. I'm not a tech person, and they were able to see when those accounts were created. All 3 accounts were created on December 1st or December 3rd, which was the day the inspection started. And that's all that I knew about it. And I didn't even find that they changed. Somebody else on Twitter found that they changed, that account changed. And that whole thing's a disgrace. And I hope that person goes to jail. And that's honestly all I know about it. The other thing that I wanted to address was that it's very, very odd. On December 31st, the Freedom of Information account, Freedom of Information Act, on the Lanza 483s, was, a lot of people don't know this, was released to people that put in those requests for Lanza. So to back up a second, with Bothell, after the inspection was over, funds all over the country would put in these 483 requests to find out whether or not there was a 483 at Bothell, And the FDA and the FOIs were not returned. They were either ignored, or they said that we do not have any records. It wasn't until after the PDUFA date, sometime in early December, that the FDA posted on its website, as you all know, the actual 483 from Bothell. And they did it for everybody at the same time. They never emailed back the 483. People didn't know why they did this. I still don't know why they did this. Some people speculated, like Jing, that meant they were going to get a CRL. It's very odd to me why on December 31st, the FDA decided to email people that asked for 483 questions on Lanza and tell them that there is a 483 and that in the future they will post it, the actual wording of it, on their website. Why December 31st? So maybe there's a chance they're going to give this a CRL, and that was the FDA, covering their ass at the end of the year, responding to the FDA saying there is a 483, and maybe something happens. Something happens about it. So we'll see. We'll see why that happened. It was very peculiar to me that the FDA issued those emails on December 31st. What's your best guess on where this trades Monday? I'm guessing 50 cents, 75 cents. You should have started from the beginning, YOLO. I talked about this. It was at 49 cents and 50 cents at the end of the day on Friday. I would be very surprised if it's at 50 cents on Monday, because there's probably still some value in there for it getting approved. They're very low. And also some value in Bristol Myers maybe agreeing to an exchange. I would guess it trades somewhere between 30 and 50 cents on Monday. I'd be surprised if it's below 30 cents, because I think a lot of large funds, and even myself, I think I'd be interested in purchasing it. Return from 30 cents to $3 or 30 cents to $5 is a very large return, obviously. And the way I approach it is there's probably a 50% chance there's a settlement. And in that 50%, I put in that Ida-cel and Lysocell are approved. If Ida-cel and Lysocell are approved, I would say there's more likely like a 75% chance there's a settlement, maybe 80% chance there's a settlement. And then I would say the expected value of that settlement is probably $2. So it ranges from $1 to $5. I would say the expected value is $2. And if the expected value is $2 and there's a 50% chance of it happening, then it's worth $1, not discounted. And if you can discount it, you also have to pay. You have to pay 25% on that dollar, so that gets you down to 75 cents. It's easy to see why you get to a 25 to 35 to 45 cent area. I think I'm being pretty conservative with the $2. It could be worth more than that, but that's how I approach it. Zach, you're done. Or is his name Alex? There was an Alex done earlier that had his comments deleted. It's the same person. What do they write? It was an Alex Dunn. Yeah, the really tough guys don't want to tell us their name when they slander people, but it doesn't really matter. I would love to hear his historical examples of being a stock promoter. I don't think it would be unreasonable to report that fake Twitter account to Twitter. At least it's not the SEC. That actually is more than enough to launch a market manipulation case. For what it's worth, I think did a great job doing due diligence, and I am still eager to discuss ideas in the future. Always good about to do with smart people. Anthony, thanks. I don't plan on going away. I'm going to keep doing this for interesting ideas. I think this forum is the best for special situations. So in the future, when there's M&A stuff or there's any kind of, I don't really do biotech anymore, which is amazing because I did this and this was a disaster. But if I do happen to get involved with biotech in the future, or if I get involved, I do a lot of merger stuff. So if let's say there's a company that's doing a competitive process, or there's a few different bidders in a public article that comes out, I'm more than happy to come on here and talk about my thought process and about how I like it. I'm not going to report the accounts to the SEC, and you could do that. Yeah, I'm sure it's been reported already. I didn't learn anything proprietarily. I just saw 2 weeks earlier that they were created. I thought they were Bristol-Myers accounts, obviously. If Lonza was the reason for CRL, does Lonza get dragged in litigation? You don't get dragged in litigation, Matt, if Lonza did something on purpose. If FDA has tons of FOIA requests, which looks similar to a discovery process to my non-lawyer eyes, so why the FDA really fear discovery that much? I don't know. I will follow you on the next CVR. This is the only publicly traded CVR that's happened since Sanofi. I do like CVRs, but they're more likely to be non-tradable ones. More than happy to share if I ever get involved in a CVR again. Again, that's another something I would definitely tell people about if I get involved in CVRs in the future. My understanding is that COVID is being read into contracts by courts, etc., such as for insurance coverage. Why wouldn't a court read COVID into the CVR to extend the deadlines? Well, because a force majeure is an act of God, and COVID is, an act of God. So, it's not Bristol-Myers' fault that COVID happened. I think that you'll have to see how trials and how settlements happen as a result of COVID. And that's a good point, Marty. As people see how, as there's precedents being made in New York court, you'll probably see Bristol-Myers or the plaintiffs have a stronger view of what their case is. And we'll see that play out, but that'll take a year or 2 years to see how it plays out. I can't believe how long this YouTube is. Thank you for everything. TTYL. Thank you, David. I still don't know why the CVR was made publicly tradable to protect shareholders to allow them to bail on the CVR and avoid the risk. So, Marty, that was something that Celgene asked for. Bristol-Myers probably had no interest in that. And it's a big CVR. Most CVRs are very small. They're $50 million, $100 million, $200 million. I think once you get up into the billions, you make it publicly tradable. And that's what the Sanofi one was, and that's business. The other reason why, and I'm just speculating here, is exactly what was talked about earlier on. BlackRock and Vanguard, the largest shareholders of Celgene, do not want to own the CVR. If you make this non-publicly tradable, you have these weird institutions that own index funds and SP 500 that now have a CVR in them that does not track the S&P 500. And if it's non-transferable, they can't even sell it, in the secondary market, in the black market. So I think that Celgene was doing a favor to its largest institutional holders, saying they need liquidity to get out. If they don't want to own this, they need to be able to sell it. Cafario honestly played this one really well. He gets 3 really good drugs for essentially $0 now, or at least near future. In process, though, he torched CVRs and that would have lasting effects. Anthony, I talked about that in the past. You can go. Thanks, Matt. Hail Biden. Exactly. Not that he did anything wrong. in the BMS response to Lanza or something, but then taking out the force majeure clause and doing all or nothing. He torched CVRs for the future, though. We don't know if he took out the force majeure clause. I actually think if the Celgene board and their attorneys put that in there, I think they would have been fine with it in there because nobody foresaw this. Nobody foresaw this. It was a once in 100-year flood, and we got flooded. I mean, it was truly a once in a 100-year flood. The FDA has never not been able to inspect before, ever. So that's what happened. Anything else? Well, I would say that this went well, but I had a couple of really awful human beings and a Trump supporter flood my feed for no reason. By the way, this is why I used to not have Q&A in here. Wouldn't some funds be required to sell before it hits the OTC market? I know some funds have internal restrictions on OTC trades. The people that own this are all hedge funds and all institutions. And I think you'll probably see that turnover anyway next week because you had people that don't want to own this for litigation. So you'll see a lot of turnover next week. There'll be funds that come in purposely for the litigation, and there'll be funds that were just here for the approvals, didn't happen, and they'll get out. It'll trade a lot of volume on Monday, tens and millions of shares on Monday. And it'll be pretty sloppy. All right, I'm tired. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry it didn't work out. It was painful for me, and I wish it was better. And we'll see what happens. I mean, it's not over yet, I guess. There could still be some salvage money from this, but this was not the path that I wanted. Anyway, take care, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care. Bye.